It's only natural to take the easy path. Throughout video game history, players have found difficulty a divided topic. Nevertheless, a subgenre of first-person shooters have embraced difficulty as a key part of the experience. Movement shooters have existed for more than 20 years. They focus upon the movement of the player character and often overstep the bounds of realism. Why are movement shooters more difficult than conventional FPS? And why have they been struggling to stay relevant in a modern market? Movement shooters have had a long life. Their birth can be traced back more than 2 decades to Quake in 1996. id Software was a household name to anyone into PC gaming in the mid-1990s. They had previously developed games such as Wolfenstein 3D and the legendary Doom, both of which were massively successful. Quake, however, was different. It had something every game before it didn't: a third dimension. This third dimension allowed for innovations in level and enemy design, and now the player could jump. This innovation spawned multiple movement techniques such as circle strafing, bunny hopping, and the legendary rocket jumping. Shooting a rocket at the player's feet to achieve a massive speed boost, and allowing the player to cover massive ground at the cost of player health. This was useful in the game's single player but came into real effect in PvP multiplayer. But firstly, why is movement ability important in a game like Quake? A player's movement decides what moment-to-moment decisions they will make, to go left or right, up or down, attack or retreat, positioning in a way to which you will have an advantage over your enemy. Quake embraces the skill-based nature of movement mechanics. These techniques raise the skill ceiling to almost infinity. Quake's skillful gameplay became a mainstay of the series, however in recent years the franchise has struggled to stay relevant. Titanfall, developed by Respawn Entertainment, has been the modern equivalent for movement shooter fans. The player inhabits a pilot who has futuristic abilities to double jump, as well as wall run and slide. They also had the ability to pilot hulking mech titans, hence the name. Titanfall released to major hype and success. Titanfall 2 was released in 2016. Respawn improved upon their original formula. The predecessor had 3 titans, whereas Titanfall 2 had 7. To add to the improvements, they took a look at the pilots and their movement abilities. The pilot movement speed was increased in the sequel. Sliding became a mainstay movement mechanic. It allowed the pilots to preserve their momentum whilst on the ground. 2 key movement-based talents were introduced. The first was Stim. It gave the pilot massively increased movement speed for a short period, allowing them to build momentum and traverse the map quickly. And the grappling hook, arguably one of the most game-breaking items, but gave the game a very high skill ceiling. By using a quirk in the game's physics engine, experienced pilots were able to slingshot themselves in the direction they were moving using the grappling hook. This allowed them to gain massive amounts of speed very quickly. These 2 abilities, combined with sliding, which preserved the pilot's momentum, allowed skillful players to move at incredible speeds, and as stated prior, gave them a distinct advantage over their enemy. A fast-moving pilot is agile, elegant, and deadly. The depth of movement mechanics made experienced pilots extremely lethal, especially when compared to inexperienced players. This raised the moral question of the skill gap. When the gap between the highest and lowest skilled players is small, the game can become boring. A lack of mastery is required to be effective. However, if the gap is too large, new players may never see the shot coming, and they may feel discouraged due to veteran players having mastered the movement techniques. Movement shooters are difficult by nature, having to consider moving in 3 dimensions rather than 2. The developers of Titanfall 2 weighed in on the dilemma of movement difficulty. Titanfall's controls feel great and offer easy access to powerful abilities, and they also possess skill-based depth, and allow players to perform moves that transform the way the game is played at high levels. The developers understand that the game is not as simple as other FPS, especially when the skill ceiling is so high. The tall bar to entry is likely why Titanfall 2 struggled to sell, missing sales expectations. While the game's mechanics have shown to be expansive and an interesting shake-up to the generic FPS formula, the genre may never see the population that it deserves. Nevertheless, Titanfall set a standard for traversal mechanics in movement shooters. However, to answer the question, why don't movement shooters sell? The answer: difficulty.